if I go live. If I were stranded on an island full of mutant boarding school ladies who all had their own individual ailments due to a deadly and undiscovered mystery virus, watching it eat away at all my teachers and friends until there was nothing left but bodies, mimicking the island itself. Yeah, I'd write a book about that too. Hello readers and fellow Girl Scouts. Welcome back to another episode of the Neverland Book Club. Grab your machetes and pistols, because today we're discussing Wilder Girls by Rory Power. A book I had to read twice, because apparently I don't know where I was the first time around. I honestly don't remember initially reading this book. I seemed to be distracted the entire time. You know when you read a paragraph over and over because your mind just keeps wandering and you can't seem to get into it? Yeah, that doesn't happen to me that often, but that was what happened with this entire book. By the time I was finished reading, I was like, wait, what happened? What did I just read? I don't know what it was about. I read it wrong. See, I read it with my ears. I'd like to make it clear, that doesn't mean listening is the wrong way to read a book. Not at all. As I have just brought up in my previous How to Read video, narration of an audiobook could make or break your reading experience. Yeah, I was mostly talking about Wilder Girls. The book needs to be read, not listened to. This book was good. It was. After reading it the second time, I actually ranked it well within my top recommended reads. Though, I'm convinced it was the narration that lacked in keeping my interest the first time around, because I found myself hearing what the narrator was saying, but not really being transported as I had with other audiobooks. There were also apparently two different narrators, and honestly, both of them felt just as monotone, and I felt myself unable to keep track of which one was speaking, since they sounded exactly alike. It sounded like Siri was reading the entire book to me, but still lacked that oh-so-charming Siri sass, you know? I felt it dull, and would rewind until the beginning of the chapter on many occasions just to re-listen to the same bit again without really being excited about continuing the journey, and I found that wasn't fair to the book itself because it was a very well-written and fascinating story. It contained political and social elements similar to Lord of the Flies, but with better-dressed, badass boarding school ladies instead of loinclothed savage boys, and a 100% better plot, in my opinion. There are subplots that explore love interests, but they never overwhelm the reader into thinking you're reading a romance novel. Just people in an unimaginable situation trying their best to stay as human as they can. After reading the description for the story before diving in, which is something I don't often do, I thought, oh, how relevant to the entire collective experience of 2020. And I was excited to start reading it, which now makes me quite sad. I wish my second experience had been my first. With that being said, and since I've been vaccinated, let's dive right in. Wilder Girls is a fictional tale telling the story of the Raxter boarding school for girls, located on an isolated island. The perfect setting for a deadly and unexplainable sickness to break loose. The story begins 18 months after the Tox broke out, an illness that transforms or mutates one's body, mimicking the environment. They don't know what causes this disease, and at first, they were unaware of its contagious biases towards or against adults versus children, men versus women, etc. The students and staff have been quarantined on this island with little contact to the outside world. In the beginning, the teachers are hardest hit, falling ill and dying from the disease, leaving the infected girls to fend for themselves and begin making their own decisions on how to navigate this new world. The underlying fear throughout the novel stems from one's desperate need to remain as human as possible, since the Tox strips its victims of human qualities just to substitute for the wild, adapted qualities of the island's creatures and nature. One scene in particular that I remember holding my attention quite sternly is when Power describes one of the girls falling into a Tox episode, or flare-up as they call it, after undergoing the stress of shooting practice. Her neck slits, revealing gills, a characteristic symptom of the Tox that is unique to her experience. That's another interesting anecdote. Every case of the Tox is different depending on the person. Some have a scaled arm, glowing hair, an infected eye. Every experience varies, yes, but all have one thing in common. The island. The girls come to her aid and take her back to her dorm as if the poor thing just passed out. Nothing to see here, just a guild girl, she good. Just leave her alone. Little Mermaid. Does Little Mermaid have gills? The deep.
Oh.
The girls only receive supplies from the mainland every so often. They're grouped by rank and age, given stations of leadership, roles of responsibility, structures that would otherwise teach them civility and keep them as well-behaved as could be expected. We get anecdotes here and there of the before time, but the narrative seems to focus on the plot at hand, staying human. A foreshadowing and curious little creature known as the Raxter Blues are explained as a type of blue-colored crab, I think, that has adapted to life on the island by developing both gills and lungs so it could live anywhere. Much like our guild girlfriend, sort of. Seems a bit too convenient, but sure. The three main characters are quite well-rounded, I'd say. The two narrators, Hetty and Byatt, are close friends and would do anything to save the other as we play out. Well, Hetty would, at least. Hetty is a 16-year-old with a heart of gold and poor judgment. Her body's interpretation of the talks manifested within her right eye. It's been closed shut. During a flare-up, she can feel something crawling around behind her lid and try to scratch it out. Brutal. Byatt seems innocent at first, until we learn of her manipulative demeanor. In a flashback scene, it is revealed how she found herself at Raxter in the first place, without giving much away, since that was one of my favorite character-building parts of the book, and, you know, if you want the story, read the book. Byatt likes to play with people. She likes to see what she can get people to do based on her charm. And funnily enough, her body's manifestation of the talks is with a second exterior spine. Such confidence, such metaphor. And then there's Reese, my favorite badass with a tragic and intriguing twist and a bad attitude. Her scaled left arm and Rapunzel glowing braid makes her stand out amongst the other girls. Also, unlike the others, Raxter is her home. Her father, Mr. Harker, is the only male character in the beginning of the story. His interpretation of the talks isn't explored until later on in the book, and, spoiler, it's quite different than that of the females on the island. He flees into the woods to spare the girls of what lies before him. He's still alive when he goes, I think. I don't remember. Our heroines are accompanied by a number of other girls in the group that all have their own independent characteristics given by the talks. There are two surviving teachers we know of, the headmistress and their main teacher. The main teacher is described as a 26-year-old, which hit home for me a little. To think of someone that age dealing with something so profound and life-threatening and, well, unknown as the situation these women find themselves in is just terrifying. Of course, yes, for the girls, but for the teachers as well. Having these children's lives be their responsibility and seeing them drop like flies, trying not to drop themselves. Ooh, scary. The school is surrounded by forbidden woods that the girls know not to venture into in fear of coming face to face with other possible byproducts of the talks. Given what they know about the Raxter Blues, they have reason to believe other animals have most likely succumbed to similar mutations as well. The only girls who are allowed to break quarantine are those a part of boat shift, who normally go out to get more supplies. These girls are given the liberty of holding weapons, helping to keep order amongst the other girls, as well as other leniencies and responsibilities. When Hetty finds herself as the new member of Boat Shift, Reese is furious, since she had been coveting the position for quite some time with the hopes of going out into the Forbidden Woods to find her father. However, when Byatt suffers from a flare-up that lands her in the infirmary, she may as well have been written a death sentence. Her whereabouts go unanswered. Hetty becomes anxious to find her friend and convinces Reese to join her in finding Byatt. This is what I meant before when I mentioned poor judgment, because this decision right here is what ends up determining the future of everyone else on the island. Tiny bit selfish. At this point in the novel, we are finally introduced to Byatt's point of view. She awakens in a hospital room, unable to speak. We learn of an additional trait she has developed from the talks, and I'll let you find that out for yourself. Now, going back to the audiobook version, I don't know why they chose this person to read for Byatt, but it was almost torture to get through. I remember I had to speed it up to 2x speed just to be able to tolerate it. And when I put it back to normal and had Pablo listen for a minute, he gave me a surprised, pained look. I'm not trying to badmouth the voice actor, but it's really bad. Anyway, Byatt is being experimented on by scientists on the island to find a cure. The CDC is mentioned, but honestly, I don't quite remember if they're behind this project or not. If you've read it and remember, please remind me in the comments down below. Their main focus is to control the tox rather than eradicate it, like you would any other disease, making the dynamic more nuanced. Their loyalties are unclear, lying with Big Pharma perhaps more so than the well-being and lives of these girls. So people who need a lung transplant can have gills instead. You know, something along those lines. There are moral questions involved. Are these scientists who are basically holding Byatt hostage, as well as other girls before her, bad? They don't seem to think so, despite their methods of torturing children. Are they heroes? Perhaps, perhaps not. Depends on who's telling the story. Depends on your morals, I guess. Do the ends justify the means? Since the book is described as a feminist Lord of the Rings, Lord of the Flies? I miss Lord of the Rings. Wrong lord. I think it's important to note that this hits on social, political, and feminist topics for sure. It's believed that climate change is the cause for the tox, and the way it affects women inadvertently different than men is a nod to how adaptable women are in stressful situations, finding any given circumstance tolerable even if it's in the most macroscopic detail. The story also has a slow burn of romance that is never fully satisfied. This didn't really bother me so much though, since the story revolves around 16-year-old girls. We do have our main character, Hetty, revealed to be homosexual, though her affections for Byatt are, I felt, more so a family type of love, a deep friendship love. The post-apocalyptic mood is captivating and held me as a reader far better than it did as a listener. Power does well to turn this survival story of a few strong-willed and fierce young women into a deep thought analysis of what it means to be human. And then, the ending. The ending teased the possibility of a series, though there's no evidence to this. It was too open-ended. A standalone book needs to do just that. Stand alone. It must have an ending, a last bite, some form of satisfaction, and this did not. I will say the book cover is perfect. Look at that imagery. The flowers inhabiting the girl I assume is Hetty since her right eye is covered, unraveling into the nature within her. Ah, art. So, would I recommend Wilder Girls by Rory Power? Yes, I would. For fictional readers who like to mix a hint of post-apocalyptic dread, survival porn, and just a dash of high school drama, this book is for you. It also hit on similar themes and imagery that reminded me of the movie Annihilation. So if that's something you enjoyed, because I did, so nice I watched it twice, then this book is also for you. Just skip the audiobook. I'm sorry, Audible. But if you'd like to read other titles by Power on Audible, I'm sure she wouldn't use the same narrator twice. At least I hope not. And be sure to go to audibletrial.com/Neverland for your 30-day free trial. Linked down below, of course. Doing so helps to support this channel and helps me bring you more of these fun times. The paperback and hardcover and ebook versions are also linked below, and as you already know, that's the way to go with this title. This video's shoutout is Angelina Poulis. Thank you so much for your kind words, and thank you for watching. I'm glad these videos bring someone joy other than myself. Bit of a selfish hobby. Well, that's all I have for you today. Be sure to like this video if you liked it, and subscribe, of course, but you already knew that. Comment down below what you think your tox flare-up would be. I think I would just grow a permanent crown, since that is my true form. Alright, I'm off. Stay lost. Keep reading. Get vaccinated. Survive! Did that hurt?
Rolling.
Ow.
Look how cute you look.